Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to this 39th Urban AI conversation. My name is Hubert. I'm the founder of Urban AI, and it's a great pleasure of welcoming you today and to welcome actually the digital service of the city of Portland. So you might see that we have quite a few people today with us. So hi Hilary, hi Hoden, hi Sin, hi Mike. Great to see you. So it's really a great pleasure actually to explore this topic because it's in a sense a topic we've been exploring a lot, like how using generative AI to simplify urban processes, both with the Urban AI Academy, with the think tank, and also with the community. And so here today we really have the opportunity to explore a real use case from like the city of Portland. We will first have a presentation. So 30-minute presentation by digital service from the city of Portland on this generative AI use case. And then I will have a fireside chat with the team. Please feel free if you want to use the chat first to introduce yourself, to let us know who you are, where you are based, what you are doing, and also why you are joining this webinar. And also during the conversation, the presentation, you can share your reaction, comments, questions, and if you've been following previous conversations that I will definitely share them with our Urban AI conversation. And now I'm giving you the floor.
Great, thank you. I think we might have lost Hubert, but that's all right. We'll keep going. All right, so we are with as Hubert said, we are with the digital services team, and we are in technology services with the city of Portland, Oregon in the United States. And we're going to talk with you today about how we did a proof of concept to simplify permitting, and we're talking about building permitting with generative AI. Some of the insights that we have and where we're going in the future. Here's our agenda for today. We'll do our welcome next to introduce ourselves. We'll talk about the problem we were trying to solve, how and what we did, the insights we gathered as part of this proof of concept, and then what we're looking ahead to as our next phases of using both generative and other types of AI and machine learning within the city. My name is Hilary Brockmeyer. I am the Digital Services Manager for the City of Portland, Oregon. In digital services within the city, we do things like maintain the city's website, our intranet, many small applications, payment portals, and we also do a lot of human-centered design work, working with all of the different bureaus and offices within the city to improve their service delivery to the community. I'll pass it over to Sean to introduce himself, and then we'll go down the line.
Hello, thanks for joining us. My name's Sean Allegar McCartney, and I'm the DevOps lead for the digital services team at the City of Portland. I'll hand it off to Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike McDonald. I manage the engineering team for the digital services group at the City of Portland. Odin.
Hi there, good to be here. I'm Odin Schmidt, and I'm a web developer on the digital services team working on our website and some of this AI stuff.
Thanks, everyone. So here's where we started. In terms of building permits, our rules, as they are in probably most urban municipalities, are very complex. We have multiple codes that are very difficult for people who simply want to get a project done to understand. And many of those things they want to do in terms of a project, maybe on their home or in their business, require a permit. Could be one, could be many permits to do the work to accomplish their goals. And so as part of our work with permitting and development, we started down the path of thinking about how do we help people get to the right place the first time. And one of the services that we offer within the City of Portland is for folks to, if they have questions about a project they want to complete, they can schedule something that's called a 15-minute appointment. And those 15-minute appointments we've gosh, I don't even know, over 15 different types of 15-minute appointments that people can schedule online, and they can choose to whether they can come in person, they can do a phone call, or they can do a web meeting with an expert in the building permitting space to answer some questions so that they make sure that they're going down the right path to get their permit. What we found in digging into this problem is many time community members who may be homeowners, they could be small contractors, they could even be large contracting companies. So people who might be building giant skyscrapers choose the wrong 15-minute appointment. And they choose that because the content on the website might be confusing. They might not know exactly where they are in their process steps to pick the right one. So they struggle a lot to choose the right 15-minute appointment. So that incorrect selection oftentimes leads to delays and frustration. And that delay could be that a person selects the wrong 15-minute appointment and they end up going to that appointment and they find out they're in the wrong place. So then they have to go and schedule another one, which could be many days down the road. The frustration exists on the community side as well as on the staff side. So these could be appointments that a person shows up in the wrong place, and now the staff has blocked off this 15 minutes of time to talk to somebody, and they don't actually get to accomplish that goal. And staff also spends time rerouting instead of solving problems. So what they find is if someone shows up to the wrong appointment, that time gets spent finding help for this person and sending them to the right place, which also leads to further delays. The last thing that we were trying to tackle is some appointments go unused. And that could be because people don't show up. It could be because they booked multiple appointments and just show up to the first one that they could get. So we spent quite a bit of time in a discovery phase early in this project, identifying user experience problems. We worked with a group called US Digital Response. It is a nonprofit entity within the United States that has thousands, tens of thousands of volunteers that they match with government organizations to help solve short-term problems and help accelerate our learning and accelerate our problem and solutioning. So we worked with US Digital Response, starting by research, a lot of research on what is actually the problem that we need to solve. And so how we went about that was conducting 45-minute user interviews with 6 permit technicians. So these are the people who are answering those 15-minute appointment calls, processing permit applications, and working with the community to ensure that they can complete their projects. So in talking with these 6 technicians, we started to understand what major issues they saw and heard from appointment users. We wanted to understand the overall context and their perspective as experts who engage with the system several times per day, per week. Our findings backed up the reasons behind the project's scope, which was a good thing. And it also gave us a greater depth and clarity into the problems we were facing. As outsiders, so we come in as in a consultant role, usually in working with different business groups within the city. But as oops, sorry, I hit a different button, crazy. As outsiders, it helps us look at the permit process without much background or knowledge. So we sit in a space where we can understand from a community perspective because we don't have that underlying knowledge. We also had our volunteers helping from US Digital Response to help understanding how all these pieces could fit together. So through conducting the interviews, we found the biggest problems at a high level were community members chose incorrect appointments because they couldn't find information because the website was confusingly organized. There was unclear information hierarchy in the website organization, and it was difficult for users to find information. They also didn't know what decisions to make due to our overly complicated appointment descriptions. Second thing we found at a high level was users experienced delays and frustration. So let's talk a bit more about that. With wait times anywhere from a few days for an appointment to over a month, users would maybe make an incorrect appointment and not realize it for weeks, or maybe not realize it for a month out until they show up to that incorrect appointment. That led to massive frustration and waste. In addition to making incorrect appointments, users could get so confused by the website and appointment process, they'd often make multiple appointments and reach out through email and phone calls. So they went through every channel they could to try to get answers to their questions. That resulted in duplicated points of contact and wasted those resources on both the community member side as well as staff side. This also meant that staff lost time rerouting customers, and some appointments did go unused, which wasted even more time and resources. So the solutions we explored was having a working appointment bot. We thought that would also address many of the problems, helping users make the correct appointment and reducing errors in the wasted time. The chat bot potentially could see through some of the confusing layout and terminology on our website and deliver clients with a simple and straightforward appointment recommendation based on the project they're trying to complete. Another high-level takeaway of our research, we noticed that even though this project focused on using an AI chatbot, we saw that human-centered design is still key in making AI useful. After talking to people and understanding their needs, we're working to make our content clearer on the site, more organized and easier to understand, so that AI can respond more accurately and helpfully. In other words, if content is confusing, duplicative, or poorly structured, AI doesn't have a solid foundation to work from and seems to just make its best guess, which is sometimes wrong, but it's still confident. And that's why it can become a huge problem if we're someone who's new to interacting with a service and you don't know what you don't know. So working with US Digital Response, volunteers helped us grow our team's AI skills. But more importantly, it further confirmed that starting with a strong human-centered approach is essential. I'm going to pass this over to Mike.
All right, thanks. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we decided on to approach this. And one of the key sort of things that we decided was to, keep it small, learn quickly, iterate, get feedback, have a continuous loop where we can talk with people with something that they're actually interacting with. So what we were trying to do was create a prototype in a short period of time to get that feedback and really road test that we were on the right path for doing this. So in order to create a testable, a quick prototype, what we decided was to have a more structured conversation with folks. And you can see on the right here, there's a workflow that's very direct, not a lot of lines in between it. There's not a lot of paths that somebody could follow. It's a very direct workflow that we could learn from in order to break apart this massive problem that people are having and really direct them to, an outcome. We decided to do that rather than a more generic, maybe perhaps less targeted QA chatbot style implementation, so that we could, measure an outcome, see how people were using this and in solving that, defined problem. So in order to get that user feedback, what we decided to do was to use tools that were available to us rather than coding everything by hand and focusing on something that is good enough to get feedback versus something that is perfect and we feel super proud of at the end of it, or confident that it's going to solve all the problems. Not that we weren't proud of anything, sorry. But yeah, we were focusing on something that was good enough to get feedback rather than something that was, production ready immediately. And then one of the approaches that really helped us out in this was, in addition to the research, knowing how we were going to benchmark what was good enough and what is quality and what is a good outcome in these cases. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it to Odin to talk a little bit more about all the benchmarking and what went into building this tool.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so as far as quality benchmarking, really the goal here is to evaluate how well our agent, or really in this case, our prompt that's behind the agent, could classify just some, generic message to the user from the user, like, I want to build a deck in my backyard, or I want to add a new bathroom to my house. We want to basically classify that to a specific appointment type. If they need a bathroom, they need to talk to just like a plumbing inspector, for example. So what we did is we had about 2,400 examples of kind of real appointments that were booked from our databases. and we used an LLM to create synthetic examples based on these inquiries. So we could come up with kind of reasonable sounding questions or projects that community members might actually be asking our bot. So this is kind of helpful training data to test with for, automatically evaluating, but, it doesn't give us our real truth. So that's where we brought in human experts, so our subject matter experts from the Permitting and Development Bureau, and basically gave them a bunch of examples and said, hey, could you map each of these to the appointment type? So basically just a spreadsheet. They could go in and be like, okay, this question, if someone called me and asked this, I would say, hey, you need to book this appointment. So that kind of built our two data sets of questions that we can ask, and then, actual like ground truth, what the LLM should be responding to. So as far as running evaluations, um, I'm going to start out by saying, some errors are more impactful than others. So in this case, what we're doing is recommending a specific appointment to the user. So if they go out, book that appointment, in some cases, these appointments are really booked out. It could be a few months until they actually get to speak with someone. So, an incorrect answer could be very frustrating for the user. They could be pretty disappointed. So what we wanted to do was, let the make it okay for the LLM to say that it doesn't know. So we basically kind of wanted to build a fallback into the prompt that's just like, hey, please email or call us with this question if it's not completely confident. So essentially what we did was had a few iterations of our prompt, trying to improve accuracy. We created a script and notebook with Google Evaluation Service, and that's basically a service that Google provides, which is an easy way to provide a data set and evaluation criteria, and it kind of just runs it all in the cloud. Um, Kind of the more predominant use case is you'd actually do model-based metrics where you're taking the response from your agent and you're actually feeding that back into a LLM and you're saying, "Hey, rate this on a score 1 through 5 based on these criteria." But in this case, as you can see on our screenshot here, it's a pretty simple, like, true false scenario. Either the appointment's correct or it's not. So we can kind of just give a 1 or a 0. Um, so just an example of a few iterations we did. Our first one was we would just do a kind of a one prompt that just had all the different 20 whatever appointments in it. Then we tried kind of doing a structured prompt where each appointment had a detailed description and example use cases. And then our third iteration was kind of building in that fallback language to redirect the user if the bot is unclear. So having this kind of evaluation set up and easy to run in the cloud was very, very crucial to actually measure the quality as we're iterating on our prompt instead of just kind of like guessing with, just a few random tests here and there. So as far as getting user feedback and learning from our results, we asked, sorry, my thing heard "Hey Google" and it went off. So we asked subject matter experts to test our bot with kind of easy, like, one-to-one mappings, like medium ones that might require some follow-ups or clarification, and then hard questions that like maybe even a human without the right expertise would have trouble answering. And that kind of gets that data loaded in to our system that we can analyze. We kind of learned a best practice is going to be to review the interactions with the chatbot. So going through conversation history and kind of pay attention to the flow and how the conversation is going. Sorry, my PowerPoint just went down here because I lost my notes. So another insight was that we found that a lot of times errors or inaccurate answers would happen when information isn't being passed between our agents correctly. So in Mike's slide, you saw those 3 agents. The tool we were using, Dialogflow, kind of summarizes interactions as it passes them between agents. So sometimes it would lose details in that summary, and we would get weird results. So it's important to know what your tool is doing on the back end when it's switching between agents. Another example, getting my notes back up here, was that basically we had our subject matter experts use a built-in feedback tool. They could do thumbs up, thumbs down, and give feedback that's actually associated with their conversation so we can look back. And then finally, just understand the limitations of whatever tool you're using. If you're using a platform, and see what capability it has in terms of observability. We were using from Dialogflow from Google, called Dialogflow, was a little bit limited in terms of filtering for feedback. So it's just good to know what you can do there. All right, so kind of some outcomes from our testing phase. We saw higher accuracy in our evaluation case after doing some iteration on the prompts. We saw better appointment recommendations in user testing with the subject matter experts. Another thing we learned is that it can really help with staff trust and internal adoption if you engage with subject matter experts early and test internally first before you publish anything to the public. We also gained a reusable playbook here for future AI projects. So now that we know how to set up a quality benchmark, how to evaluate things, we can kind of apply these concepts and these skills to anything else we're doing. It's important, I think Hillary kind of touched on this, but AI needs a human framing. So you need to do some user research to figure out who your audience is and what they actually expect to get out of your AI tool. Again, kind of reiterating what Mike touched on, small pilots let you safely experiment. If you narrowly scope to one problem, especially for your first project using generative AI, it's really easy to pilot fastly and get good feedback. And then finally, collaboration is key. So building a team with UX designers, IT folks like Sean that can kind of help break down some red tape, and then developers that can actually get things implemented. And then involving the frontline staff that will be on the receiving end of whatever your AI is telling to users. And I will pass it off to Mike here for our technical.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the takeaways and the insights we gained from a technical and an engineering perspective, and then talk about where we're going next with having gained those insights. So one of the first things that we found was that while we were able to use those good enough tools, the no-code drag and drop tools were good for that. But they do have limitations, obviously, on the control and customization that you can have within them. So what our next plan is going to be is to re-implement, or when we do another implementation in a similar fashion, use more open source tooling such as LangGraph, so that whole flow can be managed in something that we're more comfortable with, like a Git repository with version controlling and a little bit more control on the sort of enterprise level that we're more comfortable with. So that would also kind of break down a lot of those barriers of having accounts and give us the ability to incorporate more of our staff into doing solving these problems with these tools by having a robust code base that we can learn from and teach each other from, and not have sort of artificial barriers for getting people involved. We can enhance our own team, as well as using things that are more open source, common in the field, with a lot of user feedback and things to draw from. It just helps the rest of us catch up to where, for instance, Odin is at this point. So hopefully that's going to lead to a bot that we can extend and add more capabilities with by incorporating different agents and different graphs and subgraphs, and really develop our toolkit for taking on these tasks in the future. So another insight was that we might want to explore different platforms and models. So with those no-code and SaaS products, you get a little locked into which model you're using, what's available to you. Some are better than others, but what we want to do is use something that's more platform agnostic. So it doesn't need to be run on the Google stack, for instance. It can be run somewhere else and use a model that might be more open source, not necessarily commercialized, or so something like that. So, and we want to be able to easily swap models too, try out different ones, because they all do function differently than each other, and they are good at some things, bad at other things. We want to be able to test those sorts of things, not get so locked into this is what it is. We want to provide the best outcome for folks, so that gives us the power to do that. Another insight that we had was that manually parsing through all the feedback and storing and running evaluations is a really time-intensive process. So what we're thinking is that next we're going to explore some of the observability platforms that are available, so that we can hopefully streamline all of that for tracing interactions, getting the feedback from users, and then running the evaluation process using things that are more powerful and expressive. So we have some examples here of like Langsmith, weights and biases, etc., for doing those things. So next I'm going to talk about what we're doing as far as our next phase from an engineering perspective. So kind of with what I was saying is what we're trying to do in this next phase is design and develop reusable agents or tooling for agents so that we can have a more robust toolkit to take from as we build new implementations of generative AI bots or agents. So building up our library of things that we can use, taking a more standard enterprise engineering approach to the whole problem, really. So that, standards are great. How do we create these things? How do we test them? And how do we scale them across the new use cases that we're seeking and getting? The next thing we're going to try to do is connect AI with our existing data through those tools and our existing infrastructure so that we can provide relevant information in a real-time fashion and have it secured. And that will help those agents make those informed decisions with the best information available to them, not necessarily just how they're inferring from generic information. We want to give them specific information. So in order to do that, we want to connect them with what we have and connect them with other aspects of the City of Portland's IT infrastructure. So actually go farther than just recommending a page on the website to look at, but rather perhaps even submitting things to our system. So we're trying to make this something that's a very broadly useful tool. So in order to do that, we need to make that connection. So then the next thing we want to do is obviously move beyond an experimentation phase and into production and learn how to continuously improve. So a lot of that involves more traditional software engineering stuff, like setting up those deployment pipelines, monitoring, observing, like we had been talking about. And then what does our maintenance look like? So we've never had to maintain an AI agent before. So what is that going to look like? So there's a lot of interesting problems that we're looking to tackle in our next phases of using generative AI. I'm going to pass it over to Sean now.
Hi, everybody. So I know I introduced myself as the digital services team DevOps lead, but actually, as anyone who has met devs or anyone who's worked in ops kind of knows, automation is a huge piece of DevOps and operations. So automation and AI was kind of one of the things that one of the hats that I wore when I joined this team after a background in DevOps. And one of the things that was handed to us was to help develop like an AI policy or rule to govern AI use and governance, to set up a governance structure for the city for staff members to use internally. So over the last 9 months, that's what one of my major focuses has been. And so our goal really was to move from our experimentation into some institutional learning. And so I'm proud to say that, we've formalized that process through the city's new AI use and governance policy, which we recently put up for internal comment before we adopt. This actually is something that is setting the expectations for bureaus on how they can interact or use or procure AI tools, while keeping some room for innovation. So the rule that we created, it was a risk-based evaluation matrix, meaning, something like our chatbot or our permit assistant is treated really differently than something high impact, like an AI, decision-making system. Every use at the end of the day still follows our shared principles, human-centered design, transparency, and accountability. And I think that's how we make responsible AI a routine part of public service and not like a one-off project. So I'll just run down sort of the bullet points that I put down on this here. We used policy. We used pilots as policy inputs. There's a lot of P's there. We took real projects like that permit bot and we took the experiences and used that to shape org-wide standards and governance. We try and see each pilot as a policy input, not just as like a technology test. So these small scale experiments help us understand real risks, real benefits, which directly informs the development of these governance frameworks. Things like how we evaluate models, how we manage data responsibly, and how we keep humans in the loop. Luckily in Portland, our starting point was really strong. We already have a lot of great cybersecurity standards in place. We also have a great data classification standards as well adopted, so that we can define how our sensitive data can be used, whether that's unrestricted, restricted, or confidential information in the public context. We did develop this AI use and governance policy. It established requirements for the ethical, transparent, and secure use and adoption of AI tools. And ultimately, it tries to, it embeds AI principles into procurement, into the system design, and into system operations. So one thing that, now that we've gotten the policy sort of out of its development phase and it's in the evaluation and adoption phase, we're sort of over the next year exploring a few key governance questions, things along the lines of how do we evaluate the appropriateness of an AI for a given civic service? What does a lightweight internal review process look like to, something that's not something that's educational. We're all kind of on this journey together within the Bureau. No one's an expert yet, but we also don't want it to be overly bureaucratic or burdensome. We're trying to ensure that we can make AI use explainable and transparent to residents in plain language. So ultimately, our rule is built on existing strengths, expanding it to include AI systems in our existing infosecurity standards, in our existing data classification framework, and into our procurement vehicles and contracting vehicles. Sorry. So yeah, we aligned this rule with some global frameworks like the NIST risk framework and the EU's AI Act, which informed a lot of our risk-based oversight model as well as our principles. And so we're closely watching, national and state level developments across the United States and across the globe. The NIST AI risk management framework, the White House AI Bill of Rights. We're trying to map those principles. We're trying to map how those principles can translate to our local government context. And this final piece kind of highlights our 8 guiding principles that we incorporated from the EU AI Act and the other reference policies that we looked at, including the GovAI coalition based out of San Jose, California, who's done a lot of work in the United States on creating a lot of boilerplate and template policies to help municipalities get their AI use policies off the ground. So yeah, in our principles, we were human-centered. We wanted it to be secure. We wanted it to be respectful of privacy. We want it to be transparent. We want the AI use to be equitable. We want it to be accountable. Humans in the loop as well, and we want it to be effective. And we ultimately want to empower our workforce. So, you know, our approach was guided by a few principles here as well. Like, we wanted to start small and learn quickly, so that we can build the policy from real use cases. And that's what we've been doing over the course of the last year. We wanted to stay human-centered. We wanted to make sure that everyone that interacted with AI understood that AI is augmenting staff, not replacing staff. A huge piece in Portland is transparency, because residents deserve to know when AI is in use in their city or in their community. And we wanted to collaborate. We didn't want the governance to be like a one-team exercise. We wanted it to be something that involved IT, legal, equity, the community, all the stakeholders across that AI would touch. And ultimately, the rule is attempting to embed responsible AI principles into the procurement, into the design, and into the operations. We want to make AI responsible AI a part of how the city of Portland delivers great services, not just like an add-on or a separate innovation track. So we really want to reach that point where every new idea involving AI naturally goes through a lens of privacy, of equity, of trust. And this pilot was sort of the first step, or the pilots we've been doing and leading up to this policy have been those first steps. This pilot wasn't just about a better permitting experience, but towards a citywide framework for safe, explainable, and people-first AI. As we look ahead, that governance foundation will also support some new experiments, more pilots, more proof of concepts across bureaus. But ultimately, the goal is simple. We want to make every future AI project, we want to make sure it's safe, centered on people, and transparent.
All right, back to me. Now we're open for questions and conversation. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, really, Hilary, Oden, Sin, Mike, Evan, for sharing your fascinating insights, which are going beyond, actually, you shared this in a GenAI project. There are also institutional learning, technological learnings on this entire project, and that's definitely super insightful. Thanks also for the very actually detailed presentation, which allow us really to see the different components, like from engineering to policy and even actually to the exploratory phase. And I might have actually a first question with the aim of going deeper into some of the elements you shared. And it might be about the exploratory phase, because we know, and you said it, Hilary, that it's really a kind of crucial step when we are setting up the urban AI, the AI project. What, in a sense, did you learn from this exploratory phase? Meaning, if you would do it again, or if you will do it again for another project, what would you, in a sense, change or fine tune or streamline?
Yeah, so Evan was one of the primary researchers in the exploratory phase. I think he will have the best insights to answer what he would do differently and what he learned, and then maybe we can jump over into the engineering phase, what we learned in those early explorations.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if I would do anything necessarily different, because the nature of that upfront exploratory work is pretty squishy. You don't know it until you get into those conversations. So I think a good principle that, Hillary had called out earlier is just always kind of start with those conversations. Always start with that qualitative research, because that's going to identify the use cases for you. It's going to identify how you might structure that work to be more understandable, not only to AI, but just humans in general. So always start there. I think one thing that I would do the next time, and as we continue to mature this process, is just optimize for how we might more quickly structure that content that we're capturing from folks like subject matter experts and in the interviews. So I feel like we built a pretty good system with like spreadsheets and stuff that Odin was sharing. And that kind of served as like a feedback loop to just continually refine that to kind of give the tools we were building a little bit more accuracy. So that would be the area I think I would probably optimize.
Super interesting. Thanks a lot for sharing, Evan. And it's great actually to see the kind of improvements or let's say changes, which are, I guess, by definition, singular per city, but that you are able to make as you are experimenting. And I think it's also an important way of highlighting the importance of starting with your users or with your communities. Like we really have a lot of municipalities, local governments that are entering the, let's say, AI, urban AI revolution or evolution. And so really important in a sense before having technological step to start with your community, with your users and interview them as you did and as you explained. I think it was actually Mike, I hope I'm right, that shared the no code limitation, the fact that as you explored like your GenAI tool, you also understood, or at least you also really like saw the limitations of no code. And could you elaborate on this? Because we really see a kind of growing hype around the no code, especially since obviously the arrival of ChatGPT and many other GenAI platforms. And so could you maybe explain like to other municipalities or urban stakeholders that would like to use those no-code tools, what are the limitations actually they could expect from it?
I would say Odin's probably going to be the better one to explain this in general, or specifically for this. But in general, I would say too that there has been a lot of evolution here as well in that space, and there will continue to be. So, you know, what I say now may not be the truth in a few years or something along those lines. So I do understand that. In general, when I focus on these things, I really focus on how do we version control this? How do we deploy this? How do we automate a lot of these things? How do we have a lot of like control over how things are happening? How do we reuse things? So that sort of stuff is what I take as a manager to be like really critical for applying some of our principles of like, don't repeat yourself, don't copy paste over here, sort of stuff like that. So I'm going to stop talking and let Odin give you the more specifics about those feelings around that.
Yeah. So speaking a bit on that, basically, I mentioned a few of the limitations, but like one was that there are things were happening behind the scenes. So we had multiple agents set up. You know, one is to figure out the appointment type. One is to send a link to the user. And then one is like to redirect to the customer service if it's unclear. And at least the tool we were using, which is Google Dialogflow, it kind of summarizes the conversation. So each agent doesn't have access to the full conversation, but just the last agent's summary of it, if that makes sense. So some details could kind of get lost there. So that just generically, I'd say that's one of the limitations, is there might be things going on behind the scenes that you don't have control or knowledge of. Another one is that their conversation history was kind of limited. So actually looking at past conversations with the bot from users and trying to filter and look for feedback. Their tools there were pretty limited. So I mean, you can always export things and like, you know, CSV, just kind of search for things, but it's nice to have the ability to actually, you know, extend off that with like an open source framework. And then finally, I would say, kind of like Mike is saying, just, you know, having an actual code base version control like on GitHub and being able to do deployment and things like that can be useful, kind of moving to an actual enterprise approach. And then, actually, I'll add one more thing, which is that there can kind of be a balance now with like ChatGPT, like you're saying, with these agentic development things like Cursor and Copilot, where you can do no code but actually be coding. You can ask an agent to build something for you and work off of that. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds, that quick prototyping experimentation, but then ultimately having a real code base that you can iterate on.
Okay, so in a sense, the open source approach for possibly for next projects also allow you to have more control on like the overall workflow and agents interaction, which is indeed very not only valuable but important, especially as a local government. You mentioned right now and also earlier in the presentation the fine-tuning, the LLM fine-tuning, and we know that it's a crucial step, but it's also let's say sometimes long and complicated process, this fine-tuning of LLM. So on this step, like what could you share to other municipalities that are maybe not always aware of this step, or that might be underestimated, like to other urban or organizations? Like, what you explain it a bit, but what does it mean actually to fine tune? And concretely, once you had your feedback from Google evaluation service,
I think you're kind of cutting out there. Is that just me?
What did you do in the LLM?
Okay, I think I lost like the last 10, 20 seconds of that, but I think what you're asking is around fine tuning. So of course, there's a few things you can fine tune. You can do the prompt itself. You can try different models, like a fast flash model versus a pro thinking model. You can adjust, the temperature and weighting. I would say really the core of it goes back to creating that quality benchmark in that evaluation process. Because what we did was just, switch from Gemini Pro to Gemini Flash and run that evaluation and see, okay, if all the answers are the same and this model's way cheaper, let's just use this one. And then again, adjusting the temperature, the grounding, and just running those evaluations. I'd say the evaluation is really the biggest part of fine tuning. You can just go play around with all the settings you have, run evaluations, and see how it affects things. I don't necessarily have any specific tips besides just experimenting and make sure you have a solid evaluation framework benchmark.
I'll add a little bit there from the business side as thinking about tips. There's still some level of mystery and hope that AI does magical things without a lot of human intervention and sort of knows what you're thinking and knows what you want. So setting expectations with again, your subject matter experts, the people who actually, in our case with permitting, understand that this isn't something that you can just give us a couple of documents and we show up tomorrow with something that's fantastic and you don't have to answer questions about appointments anymore. It really is a collaborative effort over multiple iterations to get to a place where you're happy with the end product. So setting those expectations for business users and subject matter experts that they will be involved throughout. And they also have to participate in understanding and benchmarking and scoring and deciding that, yes, it's good, or no, it's not quite there yet. And that's sometimes a difficult conversation to have because, again, the mystery behind the AI, at least the hype about it, that it'll just do all of this stuff magically and it doesn't take much from a human to make it work.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Hilary. That's indeed very interesting, this idea that you involved different experts. Was it 177, you said, experts?
No.
177 examples.
Examples.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, well, that's very inspiring actually, and interesting to see the different communities you're involving at the different step of your workflow, in the exploratory phase, your end user at the fine-tuning phase, like experts from your own service. And as you said, Hilary, it's not a magical tool. Like you need processes, and actually it's one of the comments from Mustafa Hey Redin, I hope I well pronounce your name. The big challenge in the urbanization of an urban AI ecosystem is above all the consolidation and processing of urban data at the level of municipal organization, what we really just discussed. Sin, you also explained how you extracted institutional learning from pilots and from specifically this one. Can you maybe elaborate on, let's say, the ethical learning about urban AI you extracted from this experiment?
I think that's a good question. What ethical? I would say just in general, it was a first pass at understanding how the models reason and how the models function. And it helped inform us that, there are inherent biases in the models, especially the larger models. So I think that was one piece of sort of learning that we took away from a majority of the pilots that we've done this past year is ultimately finding out that, we need to be very, very careful about how we evaluate or how we assess the suitability of the models for our public service use cases. And I think this is one of the things that we're seeing is developing, is finding frameworks for evaluating the equity or any sort of biases that a model might have. And so we're still learning and developing how exactly we're going to be evaluating these things, but we know that we want it to be a lightweight process and not something that's going to take a lot of time or a lot of cycles to get a decision out, because the pace that this industry is moving at this point right now, it's important to kind of stay on top of the technologies.
Well, thanks for sharing, and it's especially important because you mentioned it in the AI Act, so it might concern mainly maybe European cities, but you have this need actually to evaluate your system and to evaluate the robustness of your AI system. So that's also very interesting to see that you can do it quite autonomously as a team, actually, an internal team, as you did in your case. You also said, I think, Sin, it was you said that you understood in a sense that AI might augment your staff, not replacing it. And I really wanted to elaborate, or propose you to elaborate on this, because this is one of the fear we encounter the most when we are talking not only about with cities, but with civil servants and public servants. And not later than actually Monday, we had a roundtable, and it was actually one of the topic, like, will AI at the end replace us? And you explained that not really, actually, like it cannot replace, and it's more about augmenting. But can you explain why?
Yeah, I think what we've learned is that you need to use the AI as a tool, and it's not going to be a direct replacement for a lot of functions, especially in this sort of short to medium term that we're in right now. Long term, 50 years from now, I can't say what the future is going to be like. But I think one thing that could add value to your role in the future is to learn how to use AI to augment or to enhance your work and output, instead of either relying 100% on AI or being completely fearful of AI. I think the people who will see staying in, keeping their jobs, I suppose, I don't want to say that people are going to lose jobs, but I think as AI picks up tasks that are easy to automate, that historically humans had, searched through papers. As we do our digital transformation, we digitize all these records, and then, folks go from searching files to searching files in a computer. And then as we move to that next phase where we add AI into our data environments, and we have it analyzing the data analysts and the other analysts that used to do that role need to find, ways to sort of work alongside the AI so that they have that job security.
Thanks for sharing, Sin. Hilary, Oden, Mike, or Evan, do you want to elaborate or add anything on this also question?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about what Sean was just talking about. So, I mean, we can't predict the future. He's absolutely right. And I don't know if it's 2, 5, 20, never years where some jobs probably will be significantly changed, if not unnecessary, due to generative AI or robotic process automation or any of those kinds of things. But where we are coming from, the city of Portland, is we understand we are asked to do more with less every day. And as we're in municipalities across probably the globe, we have to meet our community's needs. And so being able to accurately and appropriately use these tools to help somewhat expedite some of your work and become more effective in your work and spend more time doing the more detailed or complex work that humans can do, I think will just improve the way a city of our size or cities or other government entities are delivering service, and allow us to maybe deliver more service than we are today. And so that doesn't replace humans. It just changes somewhat what we do and how we spend our time. But I do think these are tools that will help improve service delivery across the board as we learn how to work with them, not against them, and not hoping that or worrying that they're going to replace us.
Very interesting. Thanks for sharing, Hilary. So indeed, they are not replacement tools, like they are transformative tools. They are changing conditions of work. They are creating also maybe new labors, new tasks. You all explained it. And maybe shifting some work, but we will still work probably in the future differently maybe, but that's another topic. Last question, what are the next steps for the city of Portland in terms of AI projects or AI policy?
I think that one's actually ties in really well to what Mustafa asked in the chat about data and the urban data and the processing of data. The next steps for the city of Portland, really, as we're sort of adopting the AI policy, involves classifying our data. So, a piece that's at the core of AI readiness really is having your information classified as the foundation for that, because the AI, you want to make sure that you have the data classified so that the sensitive data isn't leaked. And it's not necessarily just about the models like training on the data, but it's also just about having a trusted data environment. They're not data classification. I wouldn't call that a barrier to AI adoption, but right now we're working forward on advancing a data classification pilot to get data classification labels pushed out to our entire organization so that they can prepare their data sets in their OneDrives or in their spaces before we move forward with turning on things like maybe Copilot or other tools that are enterprise tools that go into the drives and the SharePoints and can surface lots of information if it's not classified correctly.
I think thanks for sharing, Sin. And the more we work and we implement AI, the more we actually go back to data and understand the value and the importance, and the quality, of those data. This is really something we're seeing definitely. Well, thanks a lot, really, Hilary, Oden, Sin, Mike, and Evan, for taking the time to discuss this very inspiring journey, to sharing your insights on this topic. I really believe it's inspiring for any organization, not only local government that want to autonomously implement generative AI, and like doing it with keeping control. And you saw that it's possible. Like it's some work, it's a lot of work, but it's definitely possible. And I really think it's important to say it, that you can also, in a sense, implement generative AI autonomously with your own resources. Well, that's already the end of this Urban AI conversation. We will see again. It will be next week, much earlier actually. It will be at 10 a.m. because we will welcome Dan Hill. You might know Dan Hill if you've been following Urban AI for the last few years, or actually just because of himself, you might know Dan Hill. It's a great honor and pleasure of welcoming him. And we will obviously discuss urban design, we will discuss the 1 Minute City, and we will discuss some of his latest work and research at the University of Melbourne. So once again, fascinating episode. And in the meantime, take care, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.